There is a category of person that exists in almost every workplace, every social circle, every community. You know who they are without being able to fully explain why you know. They are not necessarily the loudest. They are not always the most successful by conventional measures. They do not constantly remind you of their achievements or their status or their connections. And yet something about them commands a quality of respect that most people spend their entire lives chasing and never quite catching. People speak more carefully around them. Their opinions carry disproportionate weight in a room. When they leave a conversation, the person they were talking to feels somehow better, sharper, more seen. And when they are not present, people reference them. What would she think about this? What would he do in this situation? That is not charisma. That is not luck. That is not some mysterious social gift distributed randomly at birth. That is the result of a specific set of silent, invisible habits that operate beneath the surface of every interaction they have. Habits most people never notice because they are not loud enough to be noticed. And that invisibility is precisely what makes them so powerful. Today, we are going into the psychology behind these habits. Not the surface-level stuff you have heard before. The deeper, darker mechanics of why these behaviors work at the neurological and evolutionary level. Because once you understand why they work, you will never see people the same way again, and you will have the blueprint to become someone that others cannot quite stop thinking about. The first silent habit is what psychologists call strategic self-concealment, and it is far more powerful than most people realize. Here is the dark truth behind it. In any social environment, information is currency. And the person who controls how much information they reveal about themselves controls the psychological dynamic of every relationship they are in. Most people, when they meet someone new or when they want to be liked, immediately begin offering information about themselves. Their opinions, their history, their insecurities, their ambitions, their fears. They share because sharing feels like connection, and because the anxiety of not being known feels worse than the risk of being known too quickly. But here is what this behavior actually does at the neurological level. It satisfies the other person's curiosity immediately and completely. And once curiosity is satisfied, attention moves on. Research on information gap theory by Carnegie Mellon economist George Lowenstein found that curiosity is triggered by the gap between what we know and what we want to know. The people that everyone respects instinctively manage this gap. They share enough to be interesting and warm and real. But they always leave something unrevealed, something that keeps the other person's brain slightly unsatisfied, slightly still wondering. That wondering is attention, and sustained attention is the foundation of respect. Strategic self-concealment is not coldness or manipulation. It is the disciplined understanding that mystery creates magnetism, and that the person who reveals everything immediately has nothing left to make others lean in. The second silent habit is what behavioral scientists call consistent behavioral predictability, and it operates as one of the most powerful trust generators in human social psychology. Here is the aspect of this that most people miss entirely. Respect is not built in dramatic moments. It is built in the accumulation of 1,000 small, ordinary moments where a person did exactly what they said they would do, called when they said they would call, showed up when they said they would show up, followed through on the small, unremarkable commitments that most people let slide because nobody seemed to be watching. But here is the dark psychological truth about those moments. People are always watching, not consciously perhaps, but the human brain is a pattern recognition machine running constantly in the background, cataloging behavioral data on every person in its social environment. And what it is calculating is a probability score. When this person makes a commitment, what is the likelihood they keep it? This score is updated silently with every interaction, and it determines how seriously your words are taken before you even open your mouth. The people who command deep, genuine respect have learned that every small kept promise is a deposit into this unconscious trust account. And every broken small commitment, even the ones that seem insignificant, is a withdrawal that costs far more than people realize. They treat their word as a sacred instrument, not because they are rigidly rule-bound, but because they understand at a deep level that a person whose word means everything has a kind of social power that cannot be faked, bought, or shortcut. The third silent habit is one of the most counterintuitive and psychologically sophisticated on this entire list. It is the deliberate practice of never seeking validation. And the dark truth behind why this works will make you rethink almost every social interaction you have ever had. Validation seeking is one of the most common human behaviors and one of the most damaging to perceived status. It shows up in subtle ways that people rarely identify in themselves. Sharing an accomplishment and then watching carefully for the reaction. Expressing an opinion and then immediately monitoring whether others agree. Making a joke and looking around to see if people laughed. Posting something and then checking repeatedly for engagement. Each of these behaviors is powered by the same underlying mechanism. My sense of value requires external confirmation to feel real. And here is the brutal dark psychology truth. The human brain is exquisitely sensitive to this need, and it responds to validation seeking not with respect but with unconscious social dominance. When your brain detects that someone needs your approval, it automatically registers itself as the higher status entity in that exchange. You become the judge, they become the judged, and it is almost impossible to deeply respect someone whose sense of worth you hold in your hands. The people that everyone respects have done the deep internal work, or developed through experience a genuine internal locus of value. They share their work because they believe in it, not because they need you to validate it. They express opinions because they have thought about them, not because they need agreement. That internal sourcing of value creates what social psychologists call non-contingent self-esteem, and it radiates through every interaction in a way that is immediately and deeply felt by every person who comes into contact with it. The fourth silent habit involves something researchers have called the power of selective seriousness, and it is darker and more strategically sophisticated than it first appears. People who command universal respect have mastered the art of knowing exactly which battles deserve their full gravity and which deserve none at all. They do not react to small provocations. They do not visibly stress over minor inconveniences. They do not catastrophize ordinary setbacks or match the emotional temperature of every difficult moment they encounter. But when something genuinely matters, when a real principle is at stake, when an important boundary has been crossed, they become completely and unmistakably serious in a way that makes the entire room understand the difference. This contrast is psychologically devastating in the best possible sense. Because when a person reacts with equal emotional intensity to everything, their reactions stop being meaningful signals. But when a person is consistently calm and unrattled, and then suddenly becomes genuinely serious, the social brain of everyone watching reads that shift as a seismic event. Research on emotional credibility shows that the perceived importance of a person's response is directly tied to the rarity of their strong responses. Rare, serious reactions from otherwise calm people carry exponentially more psychological weight than frequent intense reactions from people who are regularly reactive. The dark psychological mechanism here is that by controlling your reactivity, you are teaching the social brains around you to pay close attention when you do react. You are training your environment to respect your signals by making those signals meaningful through their selectivity. The fifth silent habit is one that operates so quietly. Most people never consciously register it, even as they feel its effects powerfully. It is the habit of remembering and referencing details. The people everyone respects have developed through habit or natural inclination an extraordinary practice of paying close enough attention during interactions to remember specific details, and then referencing those details in future interactions. They remember what you said you were worried about 3 weeks ago, and they ask how it turned out. They recall the name of your child, your partner, your struggling project. They connect a current conversation to something you mentioned in passing months earlier. And here is the dark psychology beneath this behavior that makes it so extraordinarily powerful. When someone references a detail about your life that you mentioned once without emphasis, you experience a neurological jolt. Your brain registers that you were truly heard, not just politely listened to, but genuinely absorbed by another person. And this experience is so rare in modern human interaction, where most conversations are dominated by people waiting for their turn to speak, rather than actually listening, that it creates an immediate and disproportionately powerful bond of trust and respect. Research on relationship quality and perceived care consistently shows that feeling truly known by another person is one of the most powerful human needs and one of the least frequently met. The person who meets it becomes unforgettable, not because they tried to be impressive, but because they paid attention when almost no one else did. The sixth silent habit is the darkest and most sophisticated of all, and it requires you to sit with something uncomfortable for a moment. The people that everyone respects have mastered what psychologists call the strategic acceptance of disrespect. not because they are passive or weak or have no sense of self, but because they have understood something profound about how social power actually works. When someone disrespects you and you respond with anger, defensiveness, or immediate retaliation, you hand them something extraordinarily valuable. You hand them proof that they have the power to affect your internal state, that their behavior can reach inside you and disturb your equilibrium. And the moment someone has that proof, your social position relative to them shifts. You have demonstrated that they matter enough to destabilize you. The people who command the deepest respect have learned through practice the almost superhuman ability to receive disrespect from a place of complete internal steadiness. They do not ignore it. They do not pretend it did not happen, but they choose the moment, the manner, and the level of response with complete deliberateness rather than reactive emotion. Sometimes they respond with calm directness that is more devastating than any emotional reaction could be. Sometimes they do not respond at all and let the silence do the work, and sometimes they respond later when the emotional charge has dissipated, and they can engage from a position of genuine strength rather than reactive defensiveness. This is not emotional suppression. This is emotional sovereignty, and it is perhaps the rarest and most powerful quality a human being can develop because it removes from every other person in your environment the ability to control your state. And a person whose state cannot be controlled by others is a person others cannot help but respect. Here is the thread that runs through every single one of these silent habits, and it is the truth that the most respected people in any environment understand at a level most people never reach. Respect is not something you ask for. It is not something you perform for. It is not something that comes from impressing people or defeating them or being louder than them or more successful than them by the metrics the world tells you to chase. Respect is the natural and inevitable response that human beings have toward someone who is fully and completely themselves. Someone whose internal world is solid enough that external pressure cannot shake it. Someone who pays genuine attention in a world of distraction. Someone whose word means something because they have made it mean something through 1,000 small, unglamorous acts of follow-through. Someone who does not need you to validate them and therefore becomes someone you cannot stop thinking about. These habits are silent because they do not announce themselves. They do not seek credit for operating. They simply work, day after day, interaction after interaction, quietly building the kind of presence that lasts long after the conversation has ended and the room has emptied. That is the kind of respect worth building, and now you know exactly how it is built.